Today, the governor announced 41 vetoes equaling $56 million in cuts from the budget that lawmakers passed last week. One of the most notable cuts, millions of dollars in funding for new school buses and a proposal to combine school districts in Orangeburg County. We have live team coverage tonight about what it all really means and the next steps. We start with Ashley Holland, who's live at the State House. Ashley?
The governor is against using any funds from the state's lottery to go towards school buses. So that's about $17 million from the budget that he has vetoed at this point. That was from the General Assembly's approved $29 million they had allocated to funding failing school buses. So when you do the math, that leaves just about $11 million left to replace old failing school buses in South Carolina. And the superintendent of education, Molly Spearman, says that that is not enough, and she's disappointed in this because she states there are some 1,500 buses she had wanted to replace. But Governor McMaster says the lottery should only go towards funding scholarships for students in South Carolina.
Tonight we are learning more about the state's aging school bus fleet. This comes just days after Governor McMaster vetoed millions of dollars in funding for buses. Our Chad Mills going through those numbers to break it all down and explain what it means tonight. Chad?
Judy, I'm standing here at Richland Northeast High School inside one of the buses, and if it looks like I'm sweating, it's because I am. It's hot in here. The bus is off, but even if it were on, it would still be hot because there's no air conditioning. District officials tell me that these rear engine style buses, most of them manufactured in 1995, are also prone to fires, which is why they tell me today they would encourage Governor Henry McMaster to take a ride on one of these buses and see what he thinks, see if more money needs to go to these buses. Gandhi, Governor Henry McMaster indicated that lotto money that's not guaranteed doesn't need to go to buses. Instead, it needs to go to scholarships as designed. But the Midland school leaders I talked to tonight say that the governor misjudged that big decision. They hope lawmakers will override his veto, but will that happen this year in a special session, or will it happen in January when lawmakers traditionally return? At this point, no one knows the answer to that question, but everyone I talked to today hope lawmakers will act sooner, not later. Tammy Pagan expects better.
We have one at Muller Road Middle School and 4 at Killian Elementary.
Her children take the bus to school, and she says that's the reason they show up late to class a lot.
They're on the bus way too long, and there's always phone calls that they've had to take another route of students home, so our children will be late.
It's a familiar problem for Richland School District 2.
It makes me angry. I get quite angry at the fact that our students are at risk.
Today, Richland 2 Board Chair James Manning joined Richland 1 Chair Cheryl Harris to make a public statement against a veto by Governor Henry McMaster that stops $20 million of lottery funds from going to the state's failing buses. Of South Carolina's roughly 5,600 buses, about 3,000 are older than 15 years. According to data from February, about 47% of Richland 2's fleet is more than 21 years old, 40% for Newberry, 35% for Lexington 1, and 29% for Richland 1.
We had a group of our elementary students traveling out of town, and they were traveling along 20, and the bus broke down. It was our AC Moore students, and with that bus breaking down, it was about 91 degrees that day.
In our school district, we had a bus catch fire last year. We had students on the bus, we had adults on the bus that were put at risk.
In fact, documents show there have been 108 bus fires and dangerous overheating incidents on South Carolina buses since 1995. These two say it's time for the state to fund buses better, and it's time for lawmakers to override the governor now, with families like this one in mind.
Our children's safety, getting to and from school, is just as important as the education that they get while they're at school, if not more important.
Now back to these buses for a moment. They are proving to be a bit of a conundrum. You have buses like this one with a flat face. That's because the engine is in the back of this bus. The district tells me these types of buses are more fire prone. The state also says it would cost about $72 million to replace these problem buses, most of them manufactured in the mid-90s. Instead, they would like to buy buses like this one where the engine is in the front of the bus, but there is a trade-off with these buses. They don't hold as many students, and that means in theory, the district will likely need more of them. Live here at Richland Northeast High School, I'm Chad Mills, WIS News 10.
Tonight, the state's education leader is pleading for lawmakers to return to the State House to approve funding for the state's aging buses. This comes just days after the governor vetoed millions of dollars of lottery money that would have helped replace some of those buses. Our Chad Mills is live tonight with more. Chad.
Governor Henry McMaster has said if lawmakers think funding school buses is important, they need to find a permanent source of funding to do that, not bank on lottery funds that aren't guaranteed year to year. But today, the state superintendent, Molly Spearman, tells me that she needs any funding she can get, no matter where it comes from. That's why she's urging lawmakers to override the governor's veto, even if that means returning to the State House sooner than expected.
You girls want one? Oh, y'all are eating sugar. Y'all should be eating yam sticks.
State Superintendent Molly Spearman spent the morning snacking on yam sticks and strawberries with Lexington 1 third graders.
Bon appetit.
She says moments like these remind her of why she went to Columbia to fight. Her latest fight, replacing the state's aging school buses.
Most of our children in South Carolina ride the bus to school, and we want it to be safe. We transport over 350,000 students a day.
More than half of the state's buses are 15 years old or older. So this week, when Governor Henry McMaster vetoed roughly $20 million to buy new buses, Spearman spoke out. Now she has a new message. She wants lawmakers to come back to Columbia to override his veto this summer and not when the new session begins in January.
I do expect the override will happen. The question right now is when it will happen.
So far, lawmakers haven't decided whether or not they'll come back to talk buses this year.
I can't think of anything more important than the safety of our children.
The superintendent says quick action would have a big impact. If lawmakers do return to the State House this summer and vote to send funding to buses, she says she'd be able to get the wheels turning on buying about 260 new buses that she says would be used this upcoming school year.
It makes a tremendous dent in this issue.
Jennifer Vitale, whose daughter is getting ready to be a third grader at Lexington Elementary, hopes lawmakers will act soon too.
If they don't come back early, I would definitely encourage that they address the situation immediately when they do return.
This afternoon, a lawmaker source tells me that the odds are pretty good that lawmakers will return in the next couple of weeks. He said it would be bad PR to wait to do something about these buses until January. Live in Richland County, Chad Mills, WIS News 10.
Breaking news from the State House is first this afternoon. As WIS investigates a series of recent school bus fires, the leader of the state Senate has made a big announcement to our WIS's Chad Mills. In fact, Chad's in our newsroom to explain. Chad.
Dawn Senate President Pro Tempore Hugh Leatherman, a very powerful voice in the state's political arena, told me today he wants Senate members to return as soon as next week to override a veto of school bus funding. That veto happened months ago when Governor Henry McMaster shot down the request to use surplus lottery funds to buy new school buses to replace some that are more than 20 years old. State education leaders are frightened by a series of recent bus fires, some of them caught on camera. Well, Senator Leatherman said he is frightened by those fires too. And of course, lawmakers won't be back in session until January. Leatherman told me if lawmakers wait until then, it would be too late. But it seems House Speaker Jay Lucas is not fazed by Leatherman's call for immediate action. It's still Lucas's position that lawmakers should return to take up that issue in January. In a previous statement, the House Speaker said if the Department of Education cared about buses, it would use a surplus of funds already available to that department. Well, this afternoon, a spokesperson for the State Department of Education told me that statement is false. He said they have used every dollar that they can already to replace old buses. They need more money to continue doing that. Of course, all of this comes as students return to school and we investigate a series of scary school bus fires. The state superintendent of education, Molly Spearman, says the number of dangerous school bus fires has increased over the past few years. Weeks ago, through a public records request, we got our hands on a list of those fires, and they are happening all over this state. One of those happened just months ago in Spartanburg County. A neighbor there caught it on camera.
It's like pulling out in the street and almost getting hit by somebody. That sinking feeling that you get in your stomach that makes you want to throw up. I don't really go back and watch the video because I actually thought they were all dead.
In that case, a heroic bus driver quickly rescued all of the students on board and herself. Tonight at 7 o'clock, we will talk to that heroic bus driver. We will talk to others as well as the State Department of Education makes the pitch for more funding for old school buses in the state of South Carolina. Live in the newsroom, Chad Mills, WIS News 10.
Tonight, a hero bus driver from Spartanburg County wants her voice heard at the State House. Her message to lawmakers: fund school buses. Last May, her school bus caught fire. She had only seconds to get dozens of students off the bus. Tonight, one of the most powerful leaders in the state, Senator Hugh Leatherman, told us he hears that bus driver loud and clear as he made this request.
Today, I plan on calling the legislature back, certainly on the Senate side, to override the governor's veto of $17,500,000 to buy new buses. We've got to replace those dangerous buses.
Our Chad Mills got his hands on some new data that shows a growing list of bus fires since 2013.
Disturbing stuff, but Molly Spearman, the state superintendent of education, wants parents to know that riding the bus is still the safest way to get to school when you're looking at the numbers. And she says only 2 children have died on a state school bus over the last 40 years, and she says those deaths happened in unpreventable accidents. But with an increased number of old buses going up in flames, Spearman is losing sleep, and she says keeping those buses on the road is literally playing with fire.
I'm called a hero. I don't feel like a hero.
Teresa Strobel still remembers the morning of May 9th, 2017. Well,
my route is in the Greer area.
It was a pretty typical morning for the Spartanburg County bus driver. With a bus full of students, her mind was on the Bible. She'd just finished reading the book of Chronicles that morning.
So I was talking to the Holy Spirit about that and thanking Him and all that.
And Strobel says the Holy Spirit guided her through what happened just minutes later.
I saw students standing in the back, and my first thought was fight. But I said, what are y'all doing? And then that's when another 9th grader said, Miss Strobel, the bus is on fire. I think I did like a quick gasp. I need to find a place where I could get them all safely, and I drove a little farther, saw the car wash pulled up in there.
It couldn't have been more than 45 seconds from the time I got out of the bed till I actually got into the yard.
Meanwhile, the commotion caught David Porter's attention. He lives across the street from where the bus ended up.
I ran out and I saw a school bus on fire.
A fire so hot and so intense, there was nothing Porter could do but document the carnage to give the coroner an idea of exactly what happened.
I thought everyone was dead. I had that sinking feeling that everyone was dead.
Little did he know, a heroic bus driver had quickly gotten all the students out and led them to a safe distance down the street. Later that day, she saw Porter's video.
The first time I saw it, I turned my head.
The state superintendent of education saw the video too.
Well, I remember the look on my staff's faces when they come in to tell me that we've had another incident. And then when I saw the video, you know, it was very scary. I want us to do the right thing.
The right thing to Molly Spearman, replacing buses like this one, a 1995 Thomas Type D. Spearman says back in the mid-90s, the state of South Carolina bought about 2,000 of those rear-engine 1995 buses. And now, 20 years later, about half of those buses are still on the road, and Molly Spearman says that's a problem.
The issues are with the engine being in the back, and if they get hot, smoke and that heat can cause problems.
The state calls them thermal events, and there have been 108 since 1995. 86 of those were in Type D buses. New data sent to WIS details the various bus fires since 2013.
Man in South Moore.
The state says a short in the rear heater motor caused the fire in Spartanburg County. Before that, this fire at Dutch Fork Elementary, also a 1995 Thomas Type D bus. The document shows a couple more thermal events in the Beaufort area in the past few years, some in Richland, Aiken, and Sumter too.
We need about $34 million a year dedicated to the replacement of buses.
Months ago, Governor Henry McMaster vetoed about $20 million in surplus lottery funds that would have gone to buying new buses. As a new year of school begins, lawmakers still haven't taken up that veto. Even though Spearman hopes lawmakers will override the governor's veto when they return in January, she does agree with the governor that they need a permanent fix instead of one-time money.
We need the legislature to understand that we need a recurring line item for bus replacement. The state of South Carolina is growing, and the $34 million really just meets the replacement of where we are now.
It'll cost about $102 million to replace the Type D 1995 buses alone.
Holy Spirit is my helper.
It's a bus that Strobel and her students survived on a day that's still burned in her memory.
One thing that comes back to my mind, when I was in college, I heard a poem a lot.
And on that day, she thought of the poem again. Quote, "I have only just a minute. Only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it. But it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it. Give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute, but eternity is in it." Meanwhile, here's what Thomas told us about the 1995 Type D bus. The company says, quote, "Thomas Built Buses is unaware of any design-related issues on recently reported thermal events. Our number one priority is the safe and reliable transportation of students riding our vehicles," end quote. Now back to lawmakers for just a moment. Superintendent Spearman said the best way to get them to act is to contact them. Greg.
We are continuing to investigate what our state is doing after a series of recent school bus fires. Today, our Chad Mills discovered what education leaders did this summer specifically because of those fires.
Well, Dondi, they installed 2,000 fire alarms in state buses because they know the fires will continue until a certain number of those buses are replaced. Yesterday, a powerful leader in the state Senate, Senator Hugh Leatherman, announced his hopes that the legislature would return next week to free up more funds to replace fire-prone buses. No word yet if that'll happen or not, but the odds do not look good. Tonight, just like others told us in our original story yesterday, an upstate superintendent said not doing something ASAP is literally playing with fire. It was a terrifying morning for Superintendent Scott Turner. Back in May, a bus in his District 5 schools of Spartanburg County caught fire, and somehow one of his drivers managed to get everyone out safely.
When I arrived on the scene, it was completely engulfed in flames, and my heart sank. I've never felt that way before.
The bus in question was a 1995 Thomas Type D. At one point, the state had thousands on the road. Now 900 of them remain. And State Superintendent Molly Spearman says that's 900 too many.
They're 21 now, 22 years old. So they've served us well, but they're worn out.
While Spearman waits for more funding to replace them, funding that's still uncertain, her department used the summer break to install 2,000 fire alarms on those rear-engine buses. Spearman says it was a necessary $1.1 million expenditure.
Kind of an extra layer of
an extra precaution, and with the additional inspections to be sure that we're not putting any buses out there that we know have potential problems. We won't do that. And we're watching these buses very carefully.
Back in Spartanburg County, Dr. Turner hopes the fire alarms are just a short-term fix before a long-term solution.
Is it playing with fire?
Literally, yes, it is playing with fire. I mean, because the number of these events that continue to happen across our state with this series of buses, People cannot turn their head any longer and say we're going to, it's just, to me it's unconscionable.
Dr. Turner told me there's hardly a school day that goes by where one of his buses doesn't have some kind of mechanical problem, which leads to doubling up routes. He said parents need to call their lawmakers and tell them to come back and pass a solution, even if it means a special session. By the way, Thomas Built Buses told us it's unaware of any design-related issues causing those fires. Greg.
We want to have pride in our public school system, and look, when you see these shiny buses coming down the road, it just makes me feel like we're doing what we need to do in South Carolina.
That bus is brand new, but this one was not. It was more than 20 years old when it caught fire in the upstate earlier this year. The bus driver had just minutes to get everyone out okay, and today the state's school leader laid out her new effort to replace old buses. She shared those details with our Chad Mills exclusively. Chad?
Well, and Greg, she had a lot to say, and to boil it down, she said that the time to fund school buses better is now and not later. State Superintendent Molly Spearman has made replacing old buses a priority. However, lawmakers have not. With that said, she hopes this upcoming session will be the one where that changes. Today, she laid out the budget she hopes those lawmakers will help her pass. Wayne Albright is a doctor who keeps very sick, very old patients alive.
I think it's a 92, 94.
Albright and other mechanics across the state somehow keep old school buses on the road.
We do a lot of major repairs here, changing engines, transmissions, axles.
But sometimes they're too far gone, like this bus that caught fire on Summit Parkway last year. Now it's here, just outside Albright's shop, in a graveyard of rusty yellow.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
State Superintendent Molly Spearman paid it a visit Thursday afternoon for a reason. For the first time publicly, she shared her new plan to send more buses to this graveyard.
It cost us a lot of money to keep these old buses on the road.
Spearman has drawn up her bus budget for next year. In a nutshell, she wants $13 million, some of that each year, to buy new ones. She also wants lawmakers to override the governor's veto of $17 million in lotto funds that would have gone to buses. She hopes to use that money to replace the 1995 Thomas rear-engine bus, which she says has been known to catch fire.
With the override on the veto, if we get that funding, we'll still have several hundred of those, about 500 that we have to replace. So we need that additional dollars to get them off.
Yeah.
In the meantime, this bus doctor will keep doing whatever he can.
We have the kids on school buses. We need to make sure that they're safe.
A couple important footnotes for you. Spearman says riding the bus is still the safest way to get to school, and given the trend of fires, the state is doing more inspections and has installed heat alarms in those problem buses.